Hello friends, it's Shari, and today I'm creating a really fun Ta-Da Diorama birthday card with the new little mini set, You're So Narly. Here is a look at that cute little mini stamp set. We have the cute little narwhal, there's a slice of cake with a narwhal horn for the candle, and then some fun accessories and sentiments. I will start by stamping out my narwhal and my piece of cake in some jet black ink on some Nina Solar White cardstock. And then I'm also stamping out the sentiment that says, "Have a gnarly birthday," and I stamped that in some Blue Jay ink, which is a dark blue. I've also pulled out the Yappy birthday stamp set just for this little bunch of balloons to have another little birthday image to add to my Ta-Da diorama. I thought it would be fun to try something a little different and make my little narwhal two different colors. So I'm starting out with some BVs, those blue violets. I've got two colors here so I can add some shading. And then for the top half of my narwhal, I'm pulling in some BGs. So this is a BG 000, which is pretty light. And then I'm also going to pull in that BG 10, kind of make this fade from the purpley color up into that blue tealish color. Then I'm just going back and forth between those two colors so that I don't have a line between them, and I get this kind of fade between the two colors. I'm adding a little bit more shading once I finish this off, and then I added some little dots of that purple up in the blue as well. For his belly, I'm just doing this in a light pink color, so I'm using an R20. Not worrying too much about shading, so I'm only using that one shade. And then for the horn, I went all over it with that Y32. I'll do the same thing to the one on the slice of cake. And then I pulled out a slightly darker yellow, which is that Y35, and I'm just coloring every other stripe of the horn. I've pulled out a pink color for the frosting on my cake. And then the frosting through the center of the cake, I'm coloring with a purple color that sort of matches my narwhal. And then for the cake itself, I'm just going to go with a yellow cake. Now for my balloons, I've started with this pinky shade, so I'm starting with the darker of the two, and then I will pull it out with the lighter shade. And then I'll go back to the darker one and add a little bit more shadow to the bottom of that balloon. For the second balloon, I wanted sort of a minty green color, so I'm using the G43 and the G40 and doing the same technique with the darker color towards the bottom, pulling out with the lighter, and then adding a shadow back in with the darker. And then for the third balloon, I will do this in a teal shade. So I have that BG23 and then the BG11 for the lighter color. I'll use the coordinating dies to cut out my images and set those aside so I can work on the Ta-Da diorama. So for the front panel, I'm cutting this from some Blue Jay cardstock. So I've pulled out my front panel here and I just need to trim down some cardstock so it will fit through my die cut machine. I'm going to use some removable tape to hold this in place, and then I'll also add in and line up that inner window that's going to cut out the center, and I'll just cut both pieces at the same time. So here's that front frame that will be on the front of the Ta-Da diorama. Now I'm going to cut the two panels that we will pull and open up our diorama with. And I wanted to cut these from some beautiful rainbow stripe paper from the Really Rainbow collection. So I've gone ahead and cut one of these, and then I will go ahead and fold on the score lines that the die creates. And I'm doing this so that I can try and line up my stripes. So this is going to be the panel on the right side, and I want the stripes in the center to align as well as I can get them to align. So what I'm going to do is lay this on my paper and line up those stripes so they're perfect. And then I'll take that same die and I need to turn it so that that fold between the big piece and the two smaller pieces is in the same place as the fold on this right panel. So it's a little confusing to kind of say, but hopefully you can tell what I'm doing. So I'm lining up that score line part of the die that's through the center there with the edge of the piece that I've already cut. I will put down this tape and then I will pull this piece out and hold this in place. And you're going to see what I was trying to do here once I cut this. So I'm going to pop this out and it will be turned this way. I'm going to fold it in the center. I'll go ahead and fold that other fold as well. So you can see here, this was what I was trying to accomplish by lining those up. Now, if your stripes don't line up, that's perfectly fine too. I was just being really picky and seeing if I could make this happen, and I think I did a pretty good job. Now for the back panel, I'm using a piece of Spiffy Speckles paper. This is that sort of aqua colored blue, and this will be the background for my little scene in my window. I do need to go ahead and cut the slots that go in these two side pieces. Normally I would do that before I folded, but since I wanted to get those stripes lined up, I went ahead and folded them. You want to make sure the arrows point towards the bottom, and then that little foot sticks out. It's going to point towards the big panel. So you can see the biggest panel on this one is on the right, and on the other side, the biggest panel is on the left. So you want to make sure those arrows point towards the bottom, line up with the bottom of the panel, and then that little toe that sticks out is pointing towards the large piece. When I pull these away, you can see that it's cut two slots. The one that is higher will be the back, and the one that is shorter will be the front. I also cut the two hillside inserts from Peacock cardstock and the two pieces that go on the back of my front panel from Blue Jay cardstock. I'm adding some inking to these two little hillsides because my little hillsides are actually going to be water. So I cut them out of that Peacock. I'm adding some Uncharted Mariner Distress Oxide, and then I'm also adding some white watercolor splatters to give it some texture. And then I'll just set these aside to dry. While those dry, I'm going to go ahead and put my pieces on the very back of my diorama. So I have two little clouds from the Spring Showers die set. I have a bunch of these in my drawer that I just keep on hand for projects. This is the smallest and the medium size. I'm just adding those to that background, and I'm using my frame as a go-by so I can kind of see what I will see when this diorama is open. I'm also adding a few hearts cut from guava cardstock. These are cut with the Hearts and Stars Skinny Tag die. Now I can take my two little slot pieces, fold them on the score lines that the die creates, and then I will add these to the back of this panel with the frame. So I flip that panel over, and I'm just adding a little dot of liquid glue. You want to flip these over and line up the little notch with the notch in that frame, but also line up the top and the bottom of this with the top and the bottom of the frame. And then I will do the same thing with the other side, just adding a little bit of glue to each of those little tabs, making sure they're folded under, then lining up the notch with the notch of the frame, and the top and the bottom with the top and the bottom of the frame. So now that my water has dried, I can add my cute little narwhal to the front little wave, and then I will add the balloons to the back one, just to the left side of him, and then I'm going to add the little slice of cake like it's floating on the wave behind him. Now I also wanted this to really look like waves, so I'm adding some stickles, but this is a little different than what I normally use. This is the Frosted Lace stickles. This has some white specks in it, so I'm just adding this to the tops of my little waves, a little bit down into the wave, and then I will set these aside to dry because I do not want to assemble my Ta-Da diorama until I make sure that this glitter is dry. I will also be adding some Stardust stickles to the balloons so that they shimmer as well. So I've let that glitter dry and it's all dry, and I am ready to assemble my Ta-Da diorama. I'm adding my adhesive to that smallest tab on the back. I'm folding this piece in half, lining it up with the left side of this back panel, and then you can see how the top and the bottom line up with that stitching detail. So you can see how that's going to work there. And then I need to do the same thing to the panel that will be on the right side. Again, adding the adhesive to that little tab. I'll fold it in half, and then this time I can just bump the two folds next to each other, and that should line up that right side perfectly. You can see there how those will open up. Now I can take my little inserts, and I have found for me that folding the tabs towards the front is a little easier because I can get a hold of them and manipulate them and slide them through the slot a lot easier. Then I can just flatten them out once they're through the slot. So that is what I will do on that back one as well as this front one here. Again, folding those towards me. That way I can kind of push them down when they don't want to go through that slot and make sure it's nice and flat, which I find it a little bit more difficult to do when I fold them towards the back. So folding them towards the front works better for me. Now I can take my frame that goes on the front and I will slide these rainbow stripe panels through those slots that I created. And I'm flipping it over so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. I'll slide this through one side. I'm going to push it all the way through so that I can manipulate this side to slide through as well. Just gives you a little more wiggle room. And then once this side is slid through that slot, you can just shift them over, pull this, and it will be in the center where it's supposed to be. So you can see once it's closed, those stripes line up, and then ta-da! Diorama! It's just so cute. Now I will be adding this to a card base, so I wanted to add a piece of pattern paper to my card base. I'm using some Yeti 12 by 12 paper, but I wanted it a little bit more colorful, so I'm using some mermaid ink to ink up all the edges. So that gold foil splatter on the paper will resist my ink, so I'll keep that pretty gold splatter, but I'm just changing the color of the paper to match my project. This is a really fun way to get a custom colored gold foiled splattered paper. I'm not too concerned about the center because that will get covered up by my Ta-Da diorama. And then once I have that inked the way I want, I'll just add some adhesive all over the back and put this onto a card base. Now I can take my Ta-Da diorama assembly, add a little bit of liquid glue. You could use a tape runner, but I like the liquid glue because it lets me kind of shift this around, get it nice and centered before it really sticks down. And I think that this is a really great way to add a little bit more stability and a great place to add your sentiment on the inside. Now for the sentiment that I stamped earlier, I'm using a sentiment banner to trim that out, and then I will line it back up with what I've already cut and make a shorter banner. This will fit along the bottom of my Ta-Da diorama perfectly. So I'm just adding a little bit of liquid glue, and I have that cute little sentiment on the bottom. Now I did want to add a bit more sparkle to this card, so I've pulled out all the stars from the Hearts and Stars with Skinny tag, and I'm going to cut that out of some gold glitter cardstock. I'm just adding a few stars to the frame just to add some more interest when this card is closed. So I'm just putting a dot of liquid glue and dropping those stars into place. I did decide that I wanted to add some to the rainbow panels as well so that they had a little bit of glimmer as well. And then here is my finished card. So when you pull those tabs on each side, you get this cute little birthday scene inside. And I just think that that little narwhal is so adorable. I love that little slice of cake with the narwhal horn too. It's just so cute. Ta-da! So here is another look at this Ta-Da diorama card with the really fun rainbow stripe paper for those panels, and then when you pull them you get this cute little birthday scene inside and you wish someone a gnarly birthday. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye!